Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on which side of the Atlantic you're on. Welcome to our live panel series, France versus Silicon Valley. Our topic today is the future of education. My name is Anne-Emmanuelle. I am the Executive Director of the French-American Chamber of Commerce in San Francisco. We are partnering with the French business magazine Challenge, represented by its editor-in-chief, Gilles Fontaine, who will be moderating this session. Before we start, I'd like to thank Bank of the West and the Franco-American Benevolent Society, sponsors of this event. So after months of school closures and remote instruction due to the pandemic, the role of education has never been more crucial and more critical and more uncertain. We've also seen a huge rise in capital going to alternative education sources. So when the dust settles, what will education look like? Some believe the future might end up looking a lot like the present, while others see a major change that has already started. To understand some of the shifts that are taking place and how schools, universities, and even companies are adapting, we're extremely lucky today to have two experts on the topic. On the French side, Charlotte Fillol, Chief Education and Product Officer at Studi, and on the California side, Paul Marca, Principal at Parallax Global Advisors. Feel free to ask your questions through the chat, and Gilles will relay them during the discussion. Gilles, you're on.
Hi everyone! Thank you for having us again for this new session on the future of education. We had a very similar team, very same close to this theme or during our last session. Last year about the future of education, but this is still a very hot topic. We learned a few days ago, hours ago, that the All Capital Fund had raised over $1 billion, specializing on, these education questions, education startups, and so we will address these different themes tonight with our two speakers who can join me now, Charlotte and Paul, on both sides of the Atlantic. Hello, Charlotte, and hello, Paul. Well, maybe you can start by, giving us a little pitch on what you are, where you come from, and how much you know about this, about this big education future. That question mark. What will become of these? Universities, campuses. Will we still need these big campuses, and will we need also to pay tens of thousands of dollars every year to get a degree? What will a degree will be worth in a few coming years? Will we need to train during our whole life? That the few questions that we'll need to address during this close to 1 hour session. Charlotte, so you are in France, right?
That's yes, I'm in Paris, exactly. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm so happy to have the discussion with you, Gilles, and you, Paul. So a quick background. So as Emma said, I'm the Chief Education and Product Officer at Studi. So you might not know Studi, but Studi is the leader in online schools in France. And so I have the chance to manage the whole pedagogical and product team. And before that, that's the interesting fact about me, is that I've been a real academic in the French system. So somehow I have the both sides, meaning the really online per player, and at the same time, for 10 years, I've been in the classical, not saying boring, but classical at least, academic programs in famous university in France.
And Paul, you well, we met a few years ago. You were still at Stanford University. Now you have you joined another company. You have a different life. Can you tell us more? You're very good. You have a very good knowledge of these education themes, topics, not only in the US and not only in California, but you travel a lot and you benchmarked all these systems. So I guess you have a lot to say. Paul.
Gilles, thank you so much, Charlotte. Great to see you. An interesting story. So when I was at Stanford, Charlotte and I met when she was at Open Classrooms.
Right.
So it feels like we're amongst old friends here. I have my entire career prior to the last couple have been spent at Stanford University in a variety of different roles. My last was as Associate Vice Provost in charge of extended education. So it's in this context I bring perhaps a little bit of knowledge. One of the things that we were trying to do while I was at Stanford is take the great things that are happening on Stanford's campus and expand them through partnerships, as with Open Classrooms and with other partners, to allow and afford more impact for the great things that are happening on the campus. And I am still passionate about that. 2 years ago, roughly, I resigned from Stanford and decided to embark on my own. I've created my own organization, Parallax Global Advisors, where I have a couple of colleagues, and we're helping other organizations think how to build academies. What are the considerations as you build those, and what are the target markets, and so on. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing now. And indeed, Gilles, as you mentioned, I've traveled quite a bit, China, Asia. I, of course, had an extensive experience in Lille, building with your technologies an education program that would help startups get better. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's a lot, because you have that's a little bit. I mean, because you had you had various lives, very honest lives on any sides. But I think you'll have a lot to bring during this session. When we had this discussion last year, we were still in the middle of the crisis, and we could already see the in France, it was tremendous. What the changes that we had to undergo during this pandemic, and the saying was that we had the opportunity to change and to transform in just a few months and do things that would have needed maybe years or decades in France to change. Now that the thing is not really yet behind us, but we're seeing a little bit clearer now. What do you see? What has changed? What has changed for good, and what is just a false impression, on your opinion? Charlotte, you want to start?
Yeah, if you want. I think many things has changed for sure. The main one I would say is that any higher education school now understand that you can add online programs and online courses, and it's fine for students. And even more than that, they like it. They enjoy part of it. And so it's not like they don't like it if they ask for it. I think now it's a need for students to be part of the time, not on the campus. It doesn't mean that we don't need campus, that they don't want to get there, but for 15%, 20% of the classes to be online is really fine, and it's really now completely acceptable. And it wouldn't have been like 2-3 years ago. So that's a short cut, which is quite important for schools. That's an economic impact that is huge. That's the first thing. The second thing is that same thing I'm thinking about students, is that they don't understand that the lifelong learning, when they're going to finish their higher education, they're going to have to learn all their life, and they're going to have to learn online. So the 15% of the part that they're doing online now in their schools, it's a way for them to know how to learn online, and that this is going to be a real competencies for them. That could be one main shift that I'd like to point out, and perhaps I'll let Paul give more insight about that.
Paul?
Sure. Yeah. So I love this idea. I guess the imagery that I'm thinking about is a pendulum swing. So especially so maybe sort of target K-12, sort of higher education, maybe corporate and or lifelong learning, and this pendulum swing. it was really prior to the pandemic on the side of in-person education. That's the best way. It's also happens to be the most expensive way if you think about all the costs associated. The pendulum swung completely to the other side in the pandemic to almost completely online for all of those categories: K to 12, higher education, corporates, and so on. And I think the pendulum is swinging back, and the question is, where will it land, right? I mean, but my sense is that in each of those different market segments, that may be a different place. I think parents are really delighted to get their children back in schools, just because of the sort of the challenge of learning and teaching their children and getting a break, perhaps. I think in higher
universities, or are you mentioning a personal experience here, Paul?
Yeah, in fact, having three sort of college-age students in with their grumpy emotions has been a bit of a challenge. I'm glad to have them out of the house at the moment. So, and we'll delightedly welcome them back during the spring break. But I would say that this pendulum swing, may be in different places for those different markets. So I love this this idea that you've got this variability, but online now is here to stay. I think that Charlotte and I can agree on that.
So here to stay, but what are we'll get to maybe some provocative ideas. What could be, some very disruptive, ideas coming from the US, because we still say that we have this very, very conservative approach in France that, there's things that you can change, other things that you can't change by any means. Charlotte, you know both systems. On your opinion, what is the gap between the France and US on these topics? What can be acceptable in France and not acceptable compared to what is on the way in the US, for instance?
I guess one main difference, but it's not especially on the online, but one main difference in the education system is, of course, the funding, the financing, the price. That's a huge difference that we have, and that changes all the mechanism, all the regulation. And so it impacts the possibility to put online or not, or the acceptation of online, because you might in the US, and Paul, you let me know, but you might less want to pay for online when you pay like 1,000, 100,000 a year. So that's the first main difference between our two sides. And the second difference is, I guess, the fact that in the US, I guess you're more open-minded about acquiring competencies that are needed by companies, for companies, and to think really about employability and so on. So in France, we tend to move on. Of course, we've got the discourse. Everybody's talking about this, but I'm not sure we do it really per se. We're more degree or diploma oriented or academic oriented rather than the US. I think these are the two main differences. And of course, it has an impact on the online implication and online acceptation by companies and by students and so on.
Paul, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's right. I also think there are implications if you consider especially what I'll call the cost model in the United States. So prior to COVID, universities would educate students as almost raw material for corporations. Perhaps fully 85% would go to industry, and often industry would actually have to re-educate anyway. They would have some sort of training and focus programs based on roles and responsibilities. So students were willing to pay that fairly high price across the board. Now I think the business model is in significant disarray. If you think about companies like Google creating their own certificates, take our program and get a job, there comes a significant question. Do I, as a student, want to go into debt for some, and it's not tens of thousands, it could be up to 150 to 200,000 US dollars for some of the best universities. Do I want to go into that level of debt and defer potential investments, houses, family, and so on until I can repay that debt by getting a job where I am beholden to that job because I need to pay off my loans, this sort of thing. So I think the business model is broken for universities, and I think this is triggering opportunities for startups to build alternative credentials, for companies to build those alternative credentials. So I just want to sort of throw that out there, that this notion of a university, this is the way things are happening, may be starting to erode a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I wanted just to add that, to the audience, feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and I'll be taking the questions along during this discussion. The end of a business model, Paul, Charlotte, what does that mean exactly? I mean, I mentioned, these huge campus. In a way, it's very similar to what we have in the the adult world. I mean, the companies, corporates. Well, you have these big campuses, and the whole thing was to attract people to these campuses, especially in Silicon Valley. Now it's about the same. You wanted, of course, to have the best professors, best campus on the best sites, and so on. So is this going to disappear in a few years from now, or what will be the value that you can add for students to attract students to your university or college?
I think basically when you think about the undergrads, what they're mainly looking for is the experience, is the life on campus, meeting friends, learn to socialize, to work in group, go international in different countries. So I guess really at the undergrad level, I'm not sure this is going to be a huge change. We might have change for sure. Like you can go to 30% of online. You might have mentors more than teachers. So you would have, I think you would have some evolution. But if you really think about your point, which was the campus, I guess the student will still pay for that. So you'll have like 10% of students that don't have the money, they don't have time, they don't want to do that. And so they'll go online. But these guys wouldn't have been to the campus anyway, so it might be a new stream of people going online, but that's not going to, I don't think it's going to be the main population, and most of the people would go undergrad to live this experience, the campus thing, and so on.
Paul?
Stanford has an amazingly great campus, and what we're able to do is in fact with the Lille program, Rati Chehi, who was the CEO and of Lille, we argued about what the phasing would be, and we took a group of sort of entrepreneurs from Euro Technologies and placed them on the Stanford campus almost as a captive audience for a week-long immersion program, and that had stunningly great effect. First, no one could walk out of the room and make a call because the business day had ended, and then the second thing was that they got a chance to live and work and feel the Silicon Valley. That magical moment for 1 week was amazing, and I think so that in the small starts to capture the opportunity that campuses have to reimagine a future state. It's not just about the undergraduates, where I agree with Charlotte. It's about socialization, learning how to work and argue and play with others, but it's also about reimagining campuses as places to convene communities and build strength from that position. And I think that's where, if you start thinking about the lifelong learning opportunity, how can campuses think about ways to do this? And in the same way, I think companies can imagine that these office buildings, maybe they need to reimagine these spaces so that they're convening people in really intense project-based approaches to deliver value, rather than I have to be in the office and have to stay later than my boss in order to get credit for being here at all, this sort of thing.
Yeah, Paul, there's a question, and that of course, because you've been working on that for a few years. question from one person from our audience, asking if could we imagine having Harvard or Stanford Satellite University in France. That's a little bit what you were trying to do, right, while you were still at Stanford University.
So I think, actually, there are many universities. I spent some time in Qatar, and what the sort of Qatar Foundation has done is built actually campuses, satellite campuses for NYU, satellite campus for Johns Hopkins Medical Center, Texas A&M, and so on. So I think the big challenge with doing that is the dilution of the talent that drive the faculty sort of activity, right? So if you believe that these universities are hiring the best and convening a community to sharpen their ideas, and if a satellite campus is difficult to support, because you will de facto dilute that the sort of the notion of friction, good friction to build energy around ideas and sharpen those ideas, doesn't happen as effectively as it might in a sort of local campus. Stanford was exploring a New York campus, which was 3 hours away, and we in the end didn't do that. I think in part because there's so few faculty who really wanted to make New York a home base. So that in and of itself is a difficult proposition. But what online does is allows and affords the ability for great ideas to be extended. And in this sort of forum, you can ask faculty questions, difficult questions. You can challenge ideas without having to be there, but use the physical campus as a capstone experience, as a means to synthesize the ideas and lessons that you hope to learn.
So we're more talking about kind of an ecosystem. We have to see that these universities as more like ecosystems. It's a matter of culture. Charlotte, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's exactly, I agree with Paul, is meaning that what they could do, or what it's to do an ecosystem online, or you can have part of the experience, not the whole thing, because the campus, as you've said, Paul, it's probably not an economic gain. It's not the real experience for the student. You have difficulties for the faculty. So you've got many barriers to do that. And that's why it's very hard to do. But some people are doing it, but it's quite hard to do. But you can have the online experience with the Stanford teacher that are going to do some masterclass, answer your question. You get the degree, you can get the real degree of Stanford online. So you can have part of the experience, part of the benefits, part of the cost as well. So it's not this 100% full experience, but it's part of it. And I guess many people would be interested. As I said, the undergrads, part of it, but also for the lifelong learning. When you work, so your full-time job, you've got a family, you just want to move on or upskill or reskill in your career, you have your lifelong learning, then these online programs or Stanford or any other brand, that's a huge and very interesting offer for all the workers.
We mentioned earlier the fact that a lot of the courses during these 2 years period were given online. It worked pretty well, right? Well, of course, the students were not so happy about it, because it's different. There was a human kind of this you need also this human interaction in the real world. You can't just stay in your room and learn the whole day from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening, 7 days a week. But it finally worked. I mean, there was a professor giving his lesson, and the audience of students were there, and so is that a good system? Is that a good process on your opinion? Is this going to stay, and is it going to be like that in the coming years?
I mean, maybe I'll take a stab at this. I think it's the pendulum swing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think at some level, what's happened is online education, even in this sort of venue, has become an option, right? And as we go in through COVID, Omicron, and name your favorite other potential permutations, one of the things that the universities are doing is, we'll just delay for 2 weeks the in-person activities. So we can let this wave pass us by or reduce the potential effect. So it's become a viable option, whereas before it was a nice to have. I think campuses and universities realize that this is a need to have. The same with corporations who are trying to train their employees to do better work. I do think, though, that this also, if you take it to a more dramatic extreme, you could imagine that perhaps only students take 3 years on a physical campus for the United States, a 4-year undergraduate degree, and go off 1 year and maintain their currency and their timing by online education. Through so you can serve, perhaps you imagine a sort of a Peace Corps concept, right? Where students in their junior year go to, let's just say, Malaysia or Cambodia to help support a really interesting research project, all the while they're taking online courses and learning in the field. So it could be much more impactful education if universities are willing to reimagine opportunities like that.
Charlotte, do you agree with that?
No, completely. I do completely agree on that. The fact that, so to answer your question, which was really about
online courses.
Yeah, really, but online, but the synchronous one, because you've got different ways to do online. So that's quite important. Here you focus on the COVID one. And so basically, I don't think it's a very, very abrupt way to say, but I'm not sure it works. Meaning in the fact that, in fact, you accept to have a asynchronous online, and then you've got your teacher and so on. But really to have classes all day long like that, I think everybody's fed up with this, and I'm not sure this is going to be the pregnant model in online. That's the first, So with the COVID, I'm not. It has moved on everything for sure. But as Paul said, I guess on this really synchronous side of it, I'm not sure this is going to stay. Really, I'm part of it, a little bit of it, but mainly this is going to be online classes. This is a different pedagogy that you need to do when you do it online. And so if I'm talking to you, I'm teaching you, okay, that's great, but it's not like real online, which makes sense. So I'm not sure this is going to stay. I don't believe it.
There's another question from the audience. What is the value in France for online certificates of American universities?
It depends, because you've got different kind of certificates. I don't know if it's what you're going to say, Paul. There is certificates and certificates.
Yeah.
So you've got some real one somehow that gives the kind of a diploma of part of a diploma, and then if it's a great brand, same thing. If it's French or American, that's the same thing. You are somehow graduated from a great university, and so it has value. Sometimes you can pay $10 or $15 or $20 to get a paper saying that you've got to follow classes from a teacher from this university. And of course, this is not the same value. So I think there's a huge difference between a certificate and a certificate. And that's why when you buy something online, you need to be really careful about that and to be aware of what is really the value of what you're buying.
Well, the HR people knows the difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about that.
You don't think so? Wow.
I actually think I think that there are both sides of the equation. Both the consumer, though, that person taking the certificate needs to find out about who's teaching the course, sort of, and what the credential is associated with that. And then the HR people, I'll tell you a story. So I traveled overseas, and often I convene alumni. I'm a Stanford alumni, and so I have the pleasure of meeting many in country. And there were some sort of PhDs and MBA graduates and so on. And then there was one other person who came and had completed a number of the massively open and online courses that Stanford had promoted and was at this alumni event. And so I think there is some confusion being generated, especially actually via LinkedIn and other platforms like that, in teasing out for HR. It's difficult often to see. And in some interesting way, it might not matter. In other words, if I took Andrew Ng's MOOC course and I could program in NLP, it doesn't matter as long as I can do the job, right? So I think there is some buyer beware on the certificates that you might get from the United States, but also I think check with your HR office and see whether that will carry any value and weight. That's really important to know.
So you also mentioned that, of course, it's quite clear right now that you know that, of course, there's still a value in the diploma, right? I hope so. Yeah, but that today you have to train for your own life. One diploma once for all is not is not acceptable anymore. But how do you maintain your your professional life relevant and make sure that you stick to the market? And because we see a lot of corporate programs, of corporate graduate programs now emerging in France and in the US also, I imagine, because these companies want to have young people mainly, or not so young, and sometimes they have different class of ages, and but they want also to have them be perfectly fitting to the jobs that they want to offer. What do you think of this evolution? And it's a kind of privatization of education, or I don't know how you call it.
But for sure, I think what you've said is right. The future of work is, you have many different numbers, but basically they're explaining that we're going to have at least 4 or 5 different jobs in your life. Sometimes I read 10 jobs, so I don't know, but you're going to have much more jobs than before. So of course you need to train, and even if you stay in somehow the same job, you will have many changes. So you need to learn all your life. Everybody's clear about that. There is no discussion somehow. Then you've got different ways, as you said. You've got the individual way, meaning I want, as a worker, to be on top of it. And so I'm doing certificate online, I'm doing diplomas online, or I'm taking courses. And that's my way to be sure that I have somehow new credential on my resume to show that I've been moving on and I've learned somehow new things. That's the first way. So it's the individual way. And that's the law in France. The CPF, for example, the new organization in France that has been made, and the decision for the government is to give people the own individual decision about that. Mm-hmm. And you've got the other way, meaning that the fact that you might be, as a worker in a company, that is going to say, this is, for example, something very important for us, and that's a way to have the best talent coming to us, is to show them that we're going to have a development plan for them, and we're going to skill them, reskill them, upskill them as much as we can. And so we create, for example, our own company academy, our own programs with our own certificate. So it's still the same need. You need to train. And so either you're a company that helps you, and that's part of the deal, either you need to move on as a worker. But I guess not doing anything or not trying to learn new competencies in this world might be a tricky path somehow.
Paul?
Yeah, in the U.S., I would say government is less involved.
I guess so.
and so it in some sense, you might view this as the Wild West. A lot of people creating certificates to fill a potential need in this lifelong learning space, generating interesting revenue. I think there's more structure in some formal companies who must think about their employee retention plans, of which education is an important part, and thinking about what that value is. What does the company need? How can we get people educated? There are many examples: Amazon, Google, Intel, and so on. I hearken back to one person that I met in my career while I was at Stanford, who said, "You're in charge of your own employability." Right. And that means that as an individual, I have to take responsibility. And sometimes this tuition reimbursement, which is a common thing in the U.S., there's many literally billions of dollars set aside to educate existing employees. You have to take advantage of those opportunities, and I think many people do not take advantage of the money that is there in order to get educated. I think that's changing now because of the ubiquity of content. You can get content anywhere. And I think that enables people to learn even I was as now an owner, I had to take an accounting class to figure out how to send appropriate bills and pay the right taxes. I mean, this is just a quick example, but I think it's relevant to go get out there. I mean, my encouragement to people as they come to us is sort of take a look at what's out there, see what you like, and then think about what you need over time. I completely agree with Charlotte. It's 5 or 6 jobs in a career now, completely different resets, and that will require new knowledge, completely new knowledge. And it's incumbent that people are in charge of their own employability.
Yeah. On a different topic, another question from a LinkedIn user about the very concerning problem of the student debt for college. Is it still getting worse? Is it getting better? And what would be the solutions to solve this situation?
That's a question for you, Paul.
That's a uniquely United States problem, I would say. And I think, in fact, the good news for those who had some debt, the COVID, they had delayed that to the repayment. This is a big problem. I do think, as I referenced earlier, the business model of universities is broken. On campuses, they fully admit that tuition often does not cover the entire expense of a physical plant called a campus, and I think that's there need to be new ways, and expansion of lifelong learning markets, for example, online could potentially generate enough revenue to offset some of the losses. The other thing that is occurring in the U.S. is consolidation of a number of universities, especially in the middle tiers. And so they can't make the finances work. So they're combining with other local and nearby universities in order to achieve financial viability. And I think there's going to be more of that, actually. And one wonders, if you go into debt and your university is no longer there, what does that mean in the long term? I don't mean to sort of take us off on a tangent here, but I would say that thinking about your own financial concerns and considering ways to look at alternative credentials might be and more inexpensive credentials might be a way to go.
So we started with the announce of O Capital raising $1 billion in this education arena. What would you do with $1 billion if you have $1 billion? In what kind of company, what kind of startup would you invest? What is the future, on your opinion, Charlotte?
I guess the future would be the K-12, which is a different segment of market, because you've got billions of students, young students, but still students. They are. I don't know if it's good for the planet or for the students. I'm not saying that. I'm thinking in terms of economy, meaning how can I make more money about it. So in terms of investment, perhaps the K-12 would be the nice one, because you've got a large population, and they might be. I think parents would be happy to have their kids learning Mandarin or any other things that they don't learn at school. So to build up, because there is this.
But do you need a startup to do that? I mean, it's.
You need a company at least. So it's 1 billion. I can buy many.
Yeah, so there will be a small amount, right? To maybe.
If you want to invest in K-12, I'm not sure it's that small amount. So I don't know. You can address different markets, different ways about it. So I guess my main focus would be in terms of market would be K-12.
Paul?
Yeah, I think sort of Owl Ventures and Tori Patterson, they have a great team there making, I'm sure, a series of portfolio investments. I think one of the interesting dimensions is, how can you think about investing? So universities are focused on core activities and productivity around their existing model. They are not innovating around sort of what I'll call platforms for enhancing the student experience. except that there may be investing in buildings and more infrastructure. So I think there's an opportunity for venture capital and companies around to think about the I'll call the student supply chain and improve that across the board from K to gray, if you want to think about this lifelong learning span. And I do believe that the part of the investment that may be interesting is real gamifying education, which would appeal, of course, to K to 12, get people more involved and active in gaming. I have one of the startups that I'm advising is Utopian, and they're looking at VR and AR. So what impact does virtual reality have in creating new environments where you can learn and grow in different ways? I will tell you one thing with the Oculus Rift, you're completely focused. You can't look at your phone because you have this thing strapped onto your face. Now, the medium for those of us with glasses, Gilles, is not very convenient. It actually hurts after about 30 minutes. But I think that form factor will resolve itself. The fact remains that the level of focus in a metaverse environment is amazing. In addition, online sort of augmented reality, you can imagine working and solving a problem and calling up a solution in real time. So this is, these are all exciting developments, I think, which need investment, not from universities who are focused on core activities, but rather from startups and novel approaches that will impact and improve, I think, over time, the way education is experienced, especially through that lifelong learning span.
So what would be your more disruptive, provocative idea, to transform education? Because it's been very, so far it's been very quiet, and I didn't get a lot of huge changes, and at the end of academic corp, we don't need professors anymore. We can do that with algorithms. That's what I was expecting, from you guys. So give me, provoke me, shock me.
So I have one thing that I was thinking about from my former boss, Dr. Andy DiPaolo. He said, sort of in the industrial age, you went to school, and in the information age, the school comes to you. And I think that's a pretty good quote. And I don't. So what would it mean if we don't go to school anymore, but rather the school comes to you, or the school accommodates you as customer? Right now, you have to fit into the model called a university, called K to 12, and that's probably not appropriate actually for most students. In other words, I might be going at different speeds as a learner through K to 12. As a university student, I might want to explore a different pathway. So how can we shift the model from, fit into this mold versus, fit education to me, bring education to me? So maybe I'm arguing this point. Who needs universities, the physical plant, when you can generate the knowledge and extend it online?
Yeah, I would say, Paul, it means that you want to do online, basically, because it would mean you have like a wide offer. Each course offer you a credential, and then you pick whatever you want. So it would be like so your answer is online, right?
I like the idea of hybrid, to be honest with you, because I think there's some place in sort of the Lidl program, you had to come together at one point. You can do a lot of the work online, but bringing that social connection, I think humans want to connect. And so I do believe that, but I think online, so maybe you argue 35%, I'd argue 50 to 60% online. So we're perhaps a little bit more dramatic than in terms of the implication of online, the opportunity I see.
So, Charlotte, do you have
I would say
a more disruptive idea?
Even more disruptive. I would say that perhaps, I don't know if it's really disruptive, but I think in France, at least, you have this crazy idea that you're going to have in higher education, that you create employability. So you've got this discourse that doesn't make sense to me. So at one point, you explain to students, come to us, you're going to get a diploma, and then you'll get a job. And so what sell students is basically employability right now. And at the same time, you explain, and this is what we've said, you're going to change your work 4 to 5 times. And so you have employability, but it's only for 3 years. So how does it make sense? Meaning that the core study that is supposed to be the basic that you're going to learn all your life, why is it focused on only short-term employability? And then my vision, and that's a huge point that I'm really bothered about. This is, for me, there is something that is wrong. And so if you really think that everybody somehow, or anybody moving on to higher education is going to have a set 5 jobs in his life, then the 3 years of higher education would be, in French, I don't know how to translate that, propédeutique, which means, many classes, very general in sociological, history, basically giving you all the basics that you need to get, you know how to criticize things, how to communicate, collaborate, all the basics that you need, and then you'll be employable and you learn the technical skills. So I guess I would love higher education to move on to create people that are really adaptable and not ready for the job like in 6 months and then 2 years. So it's not an innovation because it's like
the state of mind of
really, but that would be my innovation, if I could say that.
There's also another criticism addressed to the universities and big schools, and it's that they don't give a lot of information on, and so that would be more provocative. In France, especially, that is, universities don't give a lot of information on their students to the corporations. After they don't just get the HR departments just get the name, age, date of birth, place of birth, and the diploma, and that maybe a grade, something like that. But they don't get a lot of information on how these students behave during their scholarship, if they're shy or entrepreneur, or different things like that. But that means that the student is the product in a way, because you get they collect a lot of data on their students, but they don't give it away. Paul, what do you think?
So I mean, one technology approach that we've talked about with our former registrar was basically an e-portfolio. What if you could shift the burden rather than so I have an e-portfolio. I have all my talks. I have presentations that I can share, papers that I've done, projects that I've completed, and you as an employer, I can show you what I want you to see that will demonstrate that I have throughput and commitment in a particular job offer, for example. So you can imagine that these things are coming, these are traveling with me. The other thing that does is it shifts the burden of records keeping to the student, the learner, and by the way, he or she will be learning for a lifetime. So this notion of investing in e-portfolio, Credly is a company that was recently acquired that has done some of this, sort of interesting ways to do that. But I do want to go back to a point that Charlotte was raised, which I think is really interesting. And I noticed that Emma posted it in the chat and the question, which is
about research.
How do you build a vibrant research community at a university if everyone is sort of not there, getting the general education that Charlotte talked about and leaving for a job, right? And there is a utility function that I've been prescribing, which is sort of lifelong learning, is about getting a job and maintaining, sort of progress. I do think it's a big challenge. I know that governments like France, INRIA is a great research entity in France. There is NSF and there are others in the United States. And they have relationships with universities and manage research and knowledge. One of the big fears or challenges that universities face is how do you maintain the next generation of great researchers? I show up on a campus. I accidentally bump into sort of computer vision, and I want to pursue that as a pathway. I get a master's degree, I get a PhD, and then I become really interested and drill very deeply in that field. I become the next AI vision guy, and that may go away. There is a significant risk about the research and development strength that this sort of utility of building online education and getting jobs, so that there is a real tension there. I just want to recognize that is not easily solved, I don't think. And universities need to think a little bit about how they're attracting the next generation of leaders and researchers.
Isn't that already a problem, Paul, with what's going on now it's been going on for many years now in Stanford, especially in the computing school. I don't remember how you call it exactly, but some of the very brilliant, tough students, they entered this school, and just after 1 or 2 years, they would drop out, even out without a diploma. I mean, Sergey Brin and Larry Page was some of them. And they don't do research anymore. They just, go directly from, not even a diploma to, application for or applied research. I don't know how you would call it, but that was already the case, a decade ago or more.
Yeah, I think so. So both those guys graduated with master's degrees, and I think Larry Page might have completed his PhD at some point. But so I do think there is a, in that particular case, in Google's case, right? They were able to apply their research and build a company around that. There is another more challenging case, which is the Elizabeth Holmes case, where she didn't complete her degree. She also didn't get the lessons around sort of maybe ethics and acumen. So there are some risks in not getting that education and completing that, because some people might need to do this. So in any event, I do think that this need for education at a broad base is important, and there are some risks about not completing the degree entirely.
Charlotte, you want to add something?
No, I two things. The first one is I completely agree about the fact that if you don't have universities or enough students doing their masters and then doing their PhDs, there is a huge risk. The research is at risk, and it's already the case in France. You have less and less students doing PhDs, and even if they're doing PhDs, they're moving on to companies. They are not doing real research. So in France, it's already the case. You've got this huge trouble of getting some research for research, really, basically. And that's part of who we are as a people, as human. So there is a huge risk on that. I do agree with Paul. And then I was thinking about another innovation. So I'm moving backward. But as you were saying, Paul, about Credly and the competencies, one huge big innovation would be that you don't get a diploma from a university or it's not recognized. Your competencies, like LinkedIn is already doing it, but you generalize that, and then your certification, your competencies are based on application or your colleagues saying that you're good at that. So you've got a beginning of that, but you could imagine that would be the model of tomorrow. And so that would be a way, you were taking HR, they don't have any info about it, but then they would have, Paul has said that Charlotte is really good at speaking in public, Paul, and so on and so on. And that's part, when you have 30 people working with you saying that you're competent, you might think that, yes, this is the best proof than a B- or whatever grade on a paper. And that would be changing many things in the model of recruiting, of diplomas, and so on. And I think it's going to happen at one point.
And one of the companies I'm advising, Eightfold.ai, is actually looking at this very model. How do you automate both the hiring and also the learning trajectory throughout my career? They're doing wonderful work there.
Yeah.
There was another question from LinkedIn, from a LinkedIn user about the visa for students in the US, big issue also. And do you think maybe, Paul, you can take that one, that Joe Biden will open more visa for students in the coming months? Do we need them? or do you need them?
So I think the United States and many universities have become dependent on the influx of students paying significant tuition, and especially from China and India for the United States.
Yeah.
And these are bright students who can be here and they now cannot be here and are choosing alternative pathways to get educated. So I do think that it would be helpful if this we were able to expand the visa programs and get more students here, but both to create the diversity that has made the United States, I think, successful. I'm a firm believer in diversity and the need for that, as well as to help support the financial underpinnings of great institutions who are now suffering, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. We're getting close to the end. So I had just one thought about, when you look at the executive committees and the CEOs of the big American techs, there's a lot of these guys who are Indian-born, Indian natives, and who succeeded pretty well in the US. And of course, they have a very good, very robust university architecture with the IITs, training excellent engineers. What can we take from them? And what is funny about this, the system is that it was co-founded with European, American, and Russian funds at the very beginning of its history. What can we take from these experience, both Indian and you mentioned China? I mean, is there also something to get from China?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in those two cultures, the undergraduate and maybe master's degree programs are very rote focused. So and the volume of students, the number of students is so great that they have to have a winnowing function, a weeding out function, really. I mean, and so that's part of the downside of that. Now, that said, they are producing very good, very bright engineers who are ready to take a master's degree in the United States and learn everything else, right? In the case of many IIT graduates who come to Stanford, they go right into computer science. Then they learn sort of both the depth of computer science, but also some of the business model activities in say the adjacent departments of management science and engineering at Stanford. And so I think there's a great opportunity to provide that, and I would say there's lots and lots of content online that would provide that same level of education. The question I see is, while we might open more visas, will those students come because they've already achieved alternate pathways for the same knowledge?
Charlotte, you want to add a word?
Well, I do agree with Paul, and I guess we are less. In France or in Europe, we have less international students willing to come. That's sad to say, but mainly they're targeting US universities. So that's why I think Paul has a better idea on that. And I have to, it's a shame, but I think it's fact.
All right. Thank you very much to you two. Great discussion and very inspiring thoughts and ideas for the future of education. Thank you again for your time. And I leave the floor to Emma for the very last word. Thank you again. Cheers. Emma, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute, of course. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul, Charlotte, and Gilles. And well, obviously, education is a wide topic, and it could be discussed for hours, and there would still be more to say. But I guess the main takeaway is that we're entering lifelong learning, and that's the biggest shift compared to. I remember when we were kids. I mean, what made us adults is when we started. We stopped university and started working. I guess now we'll be adults learning all our life. So. That's interesting. Thank you once again to our sponsors, Bank of the West and Franco-American Benevolent Society. And just a quick note to tell you that our next episode will be about ethics and the internet, especially around the French presidential campaign. So stay tuned and we'll give you more information about this. Thank you all for watching and see you soon.